Max was just a tiny, vulnerable puppy when he was abandoned on the side of a busy road in Los Angeles, California. The scorching sun beat down relentlessly, and the sounds of honking cars, bustling pedestrians, and distant sirens filled the air. It was a city that never slowed down, but for Max, time seemed to stand still. He lay on the hot asphalt, trembling, his tiny body a fragile shell of the puppy he once was. His fur was matted and dirty, his ribs visible beneath his thin coat, and his once bright eyes were dull with fear. Max had no idea how long he'd been on the streets, but each day felt like a lifetime. The world passed him by as people walked briskly, oblivious to his suffering. No one stopped to give him a second glance. He had been discarded like an old piece of trash, and in the midst of all the noise and chaos, he felt completely alone. His stomach growled with hunger, and his legs ached from exhaustion. But the overwhelming sense of fear kept him from approaching anyone. After all, it was humans who had abandoned him, and he had learned the hard way that humans were not to be trusted. Days turned into weeks. Max wandered from block to block, looking for food, water, or even just a safe place to rest. The streets were not kind to a little puppy like him. He dodged traffic, scavenged for scraps in garbage cans, and slept in alleyways, constantly on alert for the dangers that lurked around every corner. His coat grew even more matted, tangled with debris, and his tiny body grew weaker as he went without food for days at a time. His trust in humans had shattered completely. He had no hope left, only survival instinct. Then one rainy afternoon, everything changed. Sarah, a kind-hearted woman who worked as a nurse at a local hospital in Santa Monica, was driving home from work. The gray clouds had gathered overhead, and rain began to pour down in sheets, creating a steady rhythm against her windshield. As she navigated the slick streets near Venice Beach, her eyes caught sight of a small, trembling figure in the gutter. Sarah's heart sank as she saw the little puppy huddled in the rain, soaked to the bone and shivering uncontrollably. She pulled over to the side of the road, her hands shaking as she reached for the door handle. Sarah had always loved animals, and she couldn't ignore the desperate plea in the puppy's eyes. The moment she stepped out of the car, she felt an overwhelming sense of urgency. She had to help him. Max's instincts kicked in as soon as he heard the sound of footsteps approaching. His body tensed, and his fearful eyes darted toward Sarah. He had learned to be wary of humans, and this one, though kind, seemed no different from the others who had hurt him. But then something changed. The woman knelt down to his level, her voice soft and soothing. She spoke to him in a calm tone, promising that he was safe now. She offered him a small piece of her sandwich, its familiar smell wafting in the air. Max's stomach growled, the hunger gnawing at him, but he hesitated. His trust had been broken too many times before. Yet as Sarah held out the food, Max felt a glimmer of hope. The kindness in her eyes, the sincerity in her voice, made him take a step forward. He cautiously sniffed the sandwich, and then, hunger overriding his fear, he took a small bite. It was the first real meal he had eaten in what felt like forever. In that moment, something deep inside him shifted. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was still good in the world. Sarah gently lifted Max into her arms, her heart swelling with compassion. She could feel his frailty, his trembling body, and she knew she couldn't leave him there. She took him to her car, wrapped him in a blanket, and drove straight to a nearby animal clinic in Culver City. The vet confirmed what Sarah had feared. Max had been severely malnourished, neglected, and had an untreated wound on his leg. The doctor explained that he wasn't sure how long Max had been on the streets, but the pup's physical and emotional scars were evident. Sarah's heart broke as she watched Max flinch at every touch, his body stiff with fear. It was clear that he had suffered immensely. The road to recovery wouldn't be easy. Max had been abandoned by the world, and it would take time for him to heal, physically and emotionally. But Sarah was determined. She promised Max that he would never feel fear or pain again. She would be there for him every step of the way. Back at her home in Santa Monica, Max began his new life. At first, he was cautious. Every door that opened, every creak of the floorboards, sent him into a panic. He would hide under the bed or in corners, his eyes wide with terror. He didn't understand why this kind woman was being so kind to him. Was it just a temporary kindness, or would she, too, abandon him like the others? Sarah was patient. She gave him space, never pushing him, but offering love and security at every turn. She talked to him softly, reassuring him that he was safe. Slowly, Max started to trust her. He began to wag his tail when she would approach. And then one day, after weeks of building trust, he crawled up onto the couch beside her. The warmth of her presence was comforting, and for the first time in a long while, Max felt something resembling peace. However, Max's healing wasn't without its struggles. He flinched when Sarah moved too quickly, and loud noises would send him into a frenzy. He was especially fearful of men, often retreating to a corner or under the bed when Sarah had visitors. It broke her heart to see the fear in his eyes, but she knew that healing would take time. Sarah continued to be his rock. She would sit beside him for hours, petting him gently, talking to him as if he were her own child. She never rushed him. Over time, Max started to come out of his shell. He would approach Sarah for cuddles, and his tail would wag when she would throw a ball for him. He even started playing with toys, something he had never done on the streets. Each small step was a victory, a sign that Max was learning what it meant to be a dog again, to feel joy, love, and security. A few months later, Sarah's life would take a turn. She had moved into a new home in downtown LA, and one night, as she worked late into the evening, an intruder broke into her house. The loud crash of breaking glass echoed through the house, and Sarah's heart stopped. She rushed to the phone, but to her horror, the line had been cut. She was trapped, isolated, and terrified. Just as panic began to set in, Max's protective instincts kicked in. He heard the noise too. Without hesitation, he rushed to Sarah's side, his body tense with energy. When the intruder appeared in the doorway, Max stood firm, his growl deep and menacing. Sarah froze, her heart racing, but Max wasn't about to back down. The intruder took a step forward, but Max lunged. With incredible strength, Max bit the man's arm, forcing him to retreat. The intruder, stunned and terrified, scrambled backward and ran out of the house, never to return. Sarah collapsed onto the floor in a mixture of shock and relief. Max had saved her life. He had transformed from the scared, malnourished puppy he once was into a courageous protector. Max wasn't just a dog, he was her hero, and the bond between them had grown unbreakably strong. In the days that followed, Sarah realized just how much Max had changed her life. She had once rescued him from the streets, but now he had given her something priceless in return: protection, companionship, and a love that was pure and unconditional. As the months passed, Max continued to heal. He began to embrace his new life fully, running through the fields of Griffith Park with Sarah by his side. They spent weekends together, hiking, playing, and exploring the city. Max's confidence grew, and Sarah was there every step of the way, guiding him through the healing process. Max's story of resilience and recovery began to inspire others. Sarah began volunteering at local shelters, using Max as a symbol of hope for other dogs in need. One day at a shelter in Echo Park, she met a scared, timid puppy named Bella. Bella's eyes reminded Sarah of Max's, full of fear, uncertainty, and longing. Max, ever the protector, walked over to Bella and gently nudged her with his nose. It was as though he was telling her, "You're not alone." Years passed, and Max continued to be a loving companion. They spent quiet evenings on the beach in Malibu, watching sunsets together, Max's head resting gently on Sarah's lap. He was aging, his fur turning gray, but his love never wavered. He had become a permanent part of her life, her family, and her heart. Max had taught Sarah the true meaning of loyalty, resilience, and love. He had shown her that even in the darkest of times, there is always a chance for healing and redemption. And when the inevitable day came for Max to cross the Rainbow Bridge, Sarah knew that his spirit would live on in her heart forever. Max's legacy of love would never be forgotten. His story became a testament to the power of second chances, reminding everyone that no matter how broken or abandoned we may feel, love, true unconditional love, can heal all wounds.